My name is Reinhard Siegmund-Schultze. I'm East German and I studied mathematics in my birth town Halle, and later on in East Germany many of us lost our jobs. Our institute was dissolved in 1989, and so after a waiting period I went to Norway and got a professorship for history of mathematics in 2000, and I've been there ever since. I'm now Professor Emeritus there in the town of Kristiansand, the southernmost tip of Norway. It was a quite surprising event and idea, and I applied for it when I heard about it on the internet, and I was accepted like many others too, and was looking forward to it and got involved in it. Okay, my talk is going to be about refugee mathematicians from Germany, out of Germany, but with an emphasis on the United Kingdom. I wrote a book in 2009 about so-called German-speaking mathematicians, meaning they were socialized in Germany during the Nazi period, right, after 1933. And for obvious historical reasons, most of them ended up in the United States. But the other place which was not finally occupied by the Nazi troops was, of course, the United Kingdom. And so it's worth to consider this specifically. And there were about 40 refugees, German-speaking refugees, to the United Kingdom at the time, most of them Jewish for obvious reasons, and about half of them proceeded even before the war began to either the British Commonwealth or mainly to the United States. So about 20 who remained. And there are certainly some specificities which apply to the United Kingdom for emigration. For instance, the internments of foreigners which set in 1939 when the war broke out, and refugees were anxious to avoid that, partly in marrying British subjects to avoid that, or by applying for British citizenship in time. Many of the refugees came from the then World Center of Mathematics in Göttingen, but we have a broad variety of topics which they treated and of different faiths. Among the conditions were, for instance, partly also anti-Semitism, which existed at the time also in England, and parts of it was that when they were school teachers in Germany and escaped, then it was difficult, of course, for them to adapt to the English language teaching, but a few of them managed that too. Just mentioning the refugee Adolf Prag, who was later on involved in the edition of Newton's mathematical papers, which is interesting for the institute here. Others never found an academic position in the United Kingdom, and there were also women among them. For instance, Grete Herrmann, who was not Jewish also, which is also specific, and she had to restrict then her activity mostly to political actions in England because she was very leftist, and that was the reason why she escaped. Others were more in the traditional mathematical tradition, like a number theory and abstract algebra, coming from Göttingen, like Hans Heilbronn, who later on founded a school in Bristol. Or another woman, Olga Tauski, who had a specific career because she kind of commuted between England and the United States at the time, but she wasn't allowed to return in 1933 to Germany, and she was very much involved in number theory and algebra. Later on turned also to applied mathematics and matrix theory, and had an Irish husband, Todd, and they became a famous couple in mathematics too. So then the topic of internments I mentioned already, which many refugees experienced as very unjustified because there were no stronger enemies of the Nazi regime than them, the refugees, right? So they were influenced by the British bureaucracy, which also later on was criticized. So there are many aspects which one could consider, partly if they applied in time for citizenship. They were also involved in war work on the British side. So the influence is in a way restricted on British mathematics, but was strong, especially in more abstract algebraic topics like group theory and number theory. Or do you have more specific questions to singular persons? There were certainly problems also with adaptation to different academic traditions compared to Germany. Some of those who had already taken their PhD in Germany were required to take degrees in Cambridge and other places once again, because otherwise their job prospects would have been very reduced, and so the people in their environment expected that they took the same or another kind of special degree in Cambridge. Again, more details I can only promise for my lectures, which many quotes which shed light on the special conditions for foreigners, which were not easy, especially if the kind of statistics which they had done, mathematical statistics back in Germany, did not fit with the kind of things which were done in Britain. For instance, Fisher wrote a letter, a famous British statistician, that he thought they were more kind of mathematical physicist and not really a statistician, as one would expect to be in England. One particular point is maybe interesting, that in 1939, even those who had already received visa to enter the United Kingdom could not act on that or proceed on that because it became void with the outbreak of the war. So this and put an additional strain on the immigrants, and some of them didn't make it and perished in the extermination camps in Germany, which otherwise would have saved by immigration to England. So it's a very sad story also, and very emotional story, immigration. And for me, always there has been a motivation by our own responsibility for the events of which led to the Holocaust, and to not forget about this for the future. So I have never been to the Isaac Newton Institute before, and have only done archival work at St. John's College 10 years ago or something about refugees to the United Kingdom. But I do have a very close relationship to England, not least due to my partnership with June Barrow Green, one of the organizers of this great meeting. And yeah, my mother actually was a professor for English literature, which brings me a little bit closer also to the British atmosphere. And I hope that my talk is going to inspire some people to look also into the book, which has, of course, then the much broader perspective also to the United States, immigration to the United States, but not including, which is also worth stressing, emigres from other German-occupied territories like Poland and Czechoslovakia. And Poland especially, they suffered most of all, because being a refugee, as sad as it sounds, was a privilege in a way that they could at least survive, right? But many Polish people, and not just Jewish scientists and mathematicians, were just killed by the occupiers, right? So they suffered many more, but much more. But there were also Polish refugees who made it in time to both England and to the United States. So my book is still available with the publisher. I'm not prepared to have it signed here because it would require to have a supply of copies here. So unfortunately, this is not the plan here. But yeah, I'm now working actually also on other topics, so I do not immediately plan to extend my research on immigration, but I have one particular emigre by the name of Richard von Mises, who was a famous applied mathematician in Germany, and he later made it to the United States, to Harvard. He didn't have a chance to get a position when he once applied in London, so he didn't make it to England, but that's another story. But he's very important also for the foundations of probability theory. And although I'm now emeritus in the history of mathematics in Norway, I don't see really a change in my activities, and I continue to do my work and hopefully get out some more books on the history of mathematics of interest to many others. And yeah, and just to maybe to prepare you, there won't be time to go much into technical mathematical details in the talk, right? It's too varied and too broad, the topic, but so it's the focus is really on the political aspects and various disciplines, but maybe it's of interest. Of course, I enjoy the great atmosphere here in Cambridge with all these many musical events, because I'm myself still singing in a choir in Norway, and my father was professor for musicology in East Germany. So I enjoy the atmosphere in many respects.